LSU has its highest ranking in the playoff era at number 1. Minnesota makes the largest jump into the top 10. They moved up 9 spots, showing that, as David mentioned, the committee is watching week to week and rewarding performance. Baylor has the lowest ranking, the 9-0 team from the Power 5 in the college football playoff era. And no team,
that's awesome,
nobody held their spot. Kirk, you see it now. You see the top 4, Georgia at number 4. Are you in agreement with what the committee selected at this juncture?
Yeah, right. As we sit right now with the results from last week, I thought Georgia would be at 4 personally and Alabama at 5. I thought Minnesota might be up in the top 6. But what David said is accurate at this point. I know they had the loss against South Carolina at home. It was not pretty. But I think what happened last week opened the door for them to slide from 6 up into the top 4 because of impressive wins against Notre Dame and against Florida. So for now, no issue at all. The interesting thing is, as we move forward, is Alabama. If Georgia eventually loses, whether it's to Auburn or it's the SEC championship game, those are 2 big hurdles. What happens to Alabama? Do they move up, or is there a little bit of a ceiling and teams behind them potentially going up and over them? By the way, Rece, I don't think that would happen until the last weekend when you start to see conference championships potentially out of the Pac-12 or the Big 12 is when they might go by Bama.
I agree. That's why I say I don't think Alabama can do anything to hold its spot or to move up. What they have to have hope for is to have everyone else hand it to them by messing up.
Let me ask you a question real quick, though, to that. Do you think if Minnesota wins the next 2 weeks, they'd be up behind Bama?
I think we're talking about at the end. I'm talking about at the very end. But I'm saying before the end.
That's before the end. That's before the Big 10 championship game. I think they could pass up Bama before that point.
Probably so.
With
but that's what I'm saying. I think the teams behind them have to give it to them. They have
but that wouldn't be the one that mattered at the end of the day. Oregon at 6 and Utah at 7 is the one that is going to threaten Alabama's ability to stay where they are, because you assume that Georgia, LSU have to play one another. Ohio State has a tough one coming up. Minnesota have to get past Ohio State eventually. But at 6 and 7, if I'm the Pac-12, and we talked all season long almost that the Pac-12 was out of this thing, now sitting at 6 and 7, they look like they're in a pretty good spot because of the teams ahead of them.
Now, look, it's quite a task for Minnesota to go undefeated. I understand that.
Definitely.
But I think the Pac-12 teams have to be wary of Minnesota because they've got Iowa ranked, Wisconsin ranked, still in the regular season schedule, and then likely a date with Ohio State, potentially Penn State again, but probably Ohio State. So Minnesota, Kirk, really has everything in front of them, and I think the Pac-12 has to also root for them to get out of the way because they have still more growth potential, even more than they've shown so far.
Yeah, there's a lot of rankings still ahead of them. I think if you're a Pac-12 fan, or especially an Oregon or a Utah fan, I think what Joey's saying, we've been kind of watching those 2 teams now for a few weeks and seeing the potential meeting that they would have in a Pac-12 championship. We kept saying if there's a 1-loss Oregon and a 1-loss Utah, be careful. While everyone's writing off the Pac-12, with the chaos in front of them, the Pac-12 champion could still be very, very much alive to get into the Final Four at the end of it. Minnesota, to me, yeah, they have Iowa, yeah, they have Wisconsin, but if they don't beat Ohio State, they're knocked out, and then that opens the door for a discussion potentially at the end with the Pac-12 champion, a Big 12 champion, and Alabama sitting there trying to get to that 4th spot. That's what I see this thing as. It's kind of trending. If Ohio State and LSU and Clemson all went out, there's 1, 2, and 3. Now we're sitting here talking about that 4th spot with the 3 teams I just mentioned.
Well, and Oregon and Utah really need each other to do well. Like, they have to both be 1-loss teams when they get to that point. They need each other to do well so they can get that signature win. Because here's the deal. If you look at Oregon and Alabama, you want to talk about Alabama only beating A&M, that's a better win probably than Oregon has. That's a better win than probably Utah has. So, one other thing, too, to point out here is the Big 12's in trouble.
That's what I was going to ask.
The Big 12 is, I mean, if you want to point to a conference that has a good chance of being left out, once they start beating each other, I mean, you look at 10 and 13 playing each other, that doesn't give them a big boost up the rankings either, so they're going to be kind of hanging in the same spot.
Well, what we assume was their best team has been in a struggle. Oklahoma has lost, and then they stop a 2-point conversion last week to win. And so they should be in trouble. It's not like a situation where Minnesota's looked really good, and we're talking about them. The Big 12, on the other hand, has tried to be in trouble because their best team, which we assume is Oklahoma, hasn't looked great. Now, if Baylor can beat them, I don't know that they get the same credit that Minnesota just got. But as far as the Big 12 is concerned, I think it would help them if Baylor won that game.
Yeah, they'll be an undefeated champion. Potentially, if Baylor could win out. Kirk, what do you think?
Well, I think Baylor's the wild card. I think Oklahoma is not helping themselves with the way they're playing. We were so excited at the beginning, the first 5 games of the year, about, hey, this Oklahoma team is no longer just having to outscore people. They got a defense. And in the last couple of weeks, they've given up 41 and 48, and all of a sudden it's like, what the heck has happened to this, or 41 and 48, what the heck has happened to the OU defense? Now I don't think it's helping their cause as far as if they get caught up in a cluster. They of course have the Baylor game this week. They have they have one more game, the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma State is still out there. To me, I think the Big 12's best case could be Baylor. If Baylor were to upset OU this weekend, they have Texas left. They would have a Big 12 championship game left. And then it comes down to what you just said. How far of a jump do they get by beating Oklahoma at home? Do they get up in there with Utah and Oregon to give themselves possibly a chance going into the last weekend of the year?
You know, there is another debate. We're not going to dive in here. I mean, this is going to be called foreshadowing a little bit that we're going to get in later.
There's no telling America.
The best debate, the most compelling one, is you have these one-loss champions, and you have Georgia lose a close game at Auburn this week, but then beat LSU in the SEC championship game. Then you have 2-loss Georgia, but SEC champion. You got to figure LSU already has a spot.
One a week. One a week.
One a week.
You have one a week where it's like if this and this and this, then it's interesting.
I wanted to give you a chance to think about your position on such a matter.
Got it. We wrote that. You ready?
You know what Joey's position is? Whatever the rankings are right now,
exactly.
They should stay right in that order until somebody loses and move up.
Exactly.
Clemson is underrated.
Yeah,
underrated. Come on.
What's up? Thank you so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. Don't forget to download the ESPN app, and if you want more premium content, which you do, make sure that you subscribe to ESPN+. See you soon.